killer looks and collecting bounties. Here's your look at the Diamond Select Lady Deadpool New York Comicon 2020 exclusive unmasked PVC diorama statue. A resistance fighter from a parallel dimension, and the sworn enemy of the freedom-hating General America, Wanda Wilson came to our dimension following a visit from her Deadpool counterpart on this world, Wade Wilson. She's highly skilled in all manner of weaponry and possesses a healing factor that makes her virtually unkillable through a physical means, as well as resistant to toxins and most forms of mental control. This exclusive unmasked gallery diorama of Lady Deadpool is based on her appearance in Marvel Comics. It is cast in high-quality PVC and features detailed sculpting and paint applications. Lots to look at here with Lady Deadpool, but before we get a closer look at the New York Comic Con 2020 exclusive, let me first thank the folks over at Diamond Select, who actually made this review possible by sending over the exclusive Lady Deadpool Unmasked that we can have a look at in this video. We're going to get things underway first of all by bringing in my ruler, just so I'm able then to tell you guys how tall the statue stands. And Lady Deadpool Unmasked is 8 3/4 of an inch tall, or just a little over 22 centimeters tall. Some very mild assembly is required on your part when you first take the statue out of its box, as Lady Deadpool comes included with a secondary katana, but the katana has to go into her hand when you first take her out. I can understand why they decided not to put the katana in her hand for the risk that it may bend or warp the sword. I suppose if you wanted to, you could leave the sword off entirely, and it doesn't look so strange when you're looking at it straight forward. It's almost as if she's pointing at you. But if you turn the statue sideways, though, it looks like Lady Deadpool is trying to perform a clothesline. So what we are going to do is we're going to put the sword in her hand in a second, but first I want to show you guys what the sword looks like up close and personal. It's been used with softer plastic, so at least the blade I think is less likely to break. But again, I can understand why they wouldn't have put the sword into her hand. It also would have added some additional volume to the packaging inside the box, and then they would have also had to make the box bigger as well, so the cost of producing that would have been a little bit more expensive. The blade has been painted nicely in a chrome finish, the guard with some metallic gold, and the hilt an off-brown color with some additional silver accents. To fit this into her hand, we're going to go ahead and pick the statue up first. I will say, like, the hole seems to be the same size as the actual handle of the sword. So while this is being something that you can fit into her hand, it isn't something that's easy right away. You really have to wiggle it back and forth to finally get the sword into her hand. You really want to resist the urge of putting pressure against this. While it is still softer plastic, there is always then the risk of this buckling. Now, I suppose, really, if you wanted to, you could have the blade going the opposite way, but really, to complement the idea that this blade is already behind her torso, I really wouldn't want to have a secondary blade going the same direction. I really think it balances things off nicely by having the blade going this way, and then the other blade up behind her back, sort of running up parallel against her arm. We're going to look at the statue's head as well as the rest of her body in a second. First thing I want to focus on is the display base. Seems to always be the thing that we start things off first when it comes to looking at the statues. The display base is pretty small in size, doesn't take up much of a footprint, and while it's all made of PVC plastic, both the body as well as the base is the only thing that's really hollow. You can see the bottom of it, sort of an off dark gray or even black color that they then dry brush some additional gray over top of it to really help the details pop. I can't tell whether this is a alleyway that she's walking through or some undercity sewer system. There's a little off pipe off to the side there, as well as the rubble of a remaining building, or sort of a wall facing there to the side. Again, the colors are kept pretty simplistic. Again, really only relying on the black of the plastic and then dry brushing the gray over top of it. It really does help to bring the cracks out, for example, and all these little imperfections that Diamond always does really nicely on the terrain that these statues are always on top of. One thing I really like also about the display base is that they've kept the colors really dark. Considering that the rest of her costume is this brighter red, I really wouldn't want to have a competing color for her display base. By keeping this a nice dark color, it really, again, doesn't compete, if only it complements the rest of the coloring of the rest of the statue's body. We're going to look at her body in a second. Starting things, I guess, second of all, we're going to look at her head sculpt. I know while I'm going to be moving this around, the blade is just going to get in the way of things. So pardon me in advance that the blade sort of interrupts the bottom corner of the screen. I'm going to kind of move it off to the side. Overall, I think it's a pretty looking head sculpt. I wouldn't want a very glamorous looking head sculpt where she looks like a supermodel, but I think that Lady Deadpool's face is pretty enough. Nice round face as well. She doesn't have a very long, as you can see, shape of her head. The eyes are nicely done with a panel lining of black around these very crystal blue eyes with a little bit of reflection off to the corner. I personally like the idea that she's looking off to the side and not looking straight forward. You can imagine that whatever target she's fighting against is kind of situated over here. As for the rest of the costume, looking at the rest of the body I should say, very much familiar looking classic Deadpool. Checks off really all the boxes. The body itself is all done mostly here in red with some side accents here done in black. For no other reason than the fact it's just Deadpool, she has all these straps strangely placed all around her arms and down her legs as well. Very much something you would expect to see in the 90s. Paint is pretty clean, I would have to say. There isn't any real areas that stand out to me where I'd look at them and think, okay, like the paint's off a little bit. For the most part, even like the smaller straps would be probably the one thing that would be the most plagued, I think, by problem paint. I don't think there's any real issues. It's a little unfinished on the bottom here, but not to the places where you would probably see it anyways. She does have on the back here 2 slots, what would normally have held the swords. As you can see, the way they've sculpted it, there's no open slots on the top or the bottom. So even if you wanted to leave the sword off, there is really no place to store it on the back of the statue's body. She has several pockets here on the back. Nice sculpt really to the overall pose and the way that they've got the body sculpted here. Pockets, of course, several large ones on the back. It gets slightly smaller here on the front, with the Deadpool belt buckle logo there on the front as well. I suppose this is the only part of the entire statue where it gets a little on the sloppier side. Being it's so small already, the one pupil is finished nicely. You can see that the other pupil doesn't have the same finished white paint. There's a little bit of also black bleed, so I guess I could go back to what I mentioned earlier. There's one little area where the paint isn't the cleanest. But again, so far away you'd be probably looking at your statue that you may not even notice that there's an issue with the paint anyways. Again, she's got all these little straps all over her legs. Lower straps on her legs for no other reason than, again, it's just the way that Deadpool's body is designed. And you can see it going back to the display base that we looked at earlier. Both the cases, her feet are arched, so it looks like she's in a moving motion. It's a nice looking statue, I have to say. Now, I don't have the regular masked Lady Deadpool, but I would still be inclined, I think, to want to pick it up. I do like the look of the prettier unmasked. She is certainly a lot prettier to look at, easier on the eyes than one that would be masked. I do think that Diamond Select has approached this statue rather nicely. The thing about it, though, is the statue is very limited. I'm going to slide things over here. The statue is limited to only 1,000 copies worldwide. Coupled with that, the fact that this is also a New York Comicon exclusive that was dated 2 years ago may make things a little bit harder if you wanted to track this down and add it to your collection. I can only hope that if you are looking to get this in a third party, like an eBay source, for example, that the persons that are having this as an auction listing, they at least are selling it at a reasonable price. I wouldn't want you to think that, well, I wouldn't want to think that you guys are spending a lot to pick this one up for yourself. She's a really pretty looking portrait of Deadpool, Lady Deadpool. But again, the prices of what these statues go for afterwards, after these conventions are always done with, I would certainly say it's worth picking up if you're a big fan of Deadpool, but I really wouldn't say spend a whole fortune to try to acquire one for your collection. 1,000 copies. That's how many of this statue would have been originally produced for the New York Comic Con back in 2020. Mind you, the last 2 years have been a bit of a blur. I suspect that most of the conventions during that 2-year time frame were either canceled or became virtual, where instead of being able to see these things and pick them up in person, instead you were treated to virtual tours where companies were showing off their wares. Maybe because of that, 1,000 copies normally would have been small, but maybe because these conventions didn't really happen during those 2 years, you may have better luck of actually trying to track this one down. The Unmasked Lady Deadpool, I think, is certainly worth a search if you are a big fan of the character, because instead of getting a masked version of Lady Deadpool, you're actually seeing what her face looks like underneath. And I gotta admit, it's a pretty looking head sculpt. Kind of looks a little bit like Emma Watson. Is it Emma Watson I'm thinking of? Yeah, I think it's Emma Watson. The coloring is nice on this one. There's a little bit of sloppiness, admittingly, around the belt buckle area, but that's generally the case when it comes to Deadpools. It's always a very small area to get in there with a hand and start painting off. But I like the pose that they put her in, as well as giving her 2 katanas instead of just the one. Now, again, you probably could have the katana facing the opposite way, but just to balance things off nicely, seeing as she already has one blade behind her back anyways, I think I would rather instead have the blade facing forward instead of facing backwards. Yeah, it's a really nice looking statue. Definitely nice, worth picking up. Like I said, if you can find one at a good price, That's always becomes the issue. With these convention exclusives, I would never always say, like, you have to go to the convention at the time to get them. You can always get them afterwards. But when you get them afterwards, you're always, again, at the mercy of the sellers that have those stocks available, and then either are selling them for skyrocketed prices, or again, if you get them around the time of the conventions, you can usually get them for about the same price as what they would be selling at conventions. But is this a statue that you would be trying to track down and add to your collection? Let me know down below in the comment section. What do you guys think of the Unmasked Lady Deadpool? And again, a big thank you to the folks over at Diamond Select that did, in fact, provide the sample of New York Comicon 2020 exclusive of the Unmasked Lady Deadpool. Nice looking statue. If you guys are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notification so you get those friendly reminders of whenever new videos are going to be popping up. And just a friendly 411, there is going to be no more Diamond Select Gallery statue reviews coming your way. And also, if you guys wanted to check out the previous ones that I have looked at here on this channel, at the very end of this video should be popping up a Diamond Select Gallery statue review playlist. If you guys want to watch that, your viewing pleasure. Lots of stuff coming your way, guys. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.